John's got a question.
Change gears here a little bit. This will reduce the number of locations where vehicles are allowed to enter 3rd Street driveways. How many of those are there, Les? Or do you know?
Well, we've gone through this, and I can't recall a specific number because I don't think we actually counted them up. We just kind of walked through and looked at individual locations. What we've done is we've identified areas where there are driveways that are no longer in service. They exist. They've been somewhat paved over in previous ITD paving projects just to keep drainage from flowing into the parking lots. But the use of the private parcels behind those driveway approaches has changed to the point that the driveways are not used at all. So those are the ones that we've identified as the priorities to take them out. Obviously, we've got to talk to property owners as part of the process when we get there. There are some that we've looked at that said, well, it's a little hard to tell. We think potentially they could come out because they have alternative driveways that enter their parcels. They may have 3 or 4 in a given parcel, so maybe we can reduce the number. So the idea here was that where we could, we would take out either unused or underused driveways as long as there's still reasonable access to those parcels by other means.
The reason I ask that is we, in the past, up in my neighborhood, we had a large discussion here on the council about curb cuts and whether there were any lots that had more than, say, 1 curb cut. And the people whose property had 2 curb cuts didn't want to give them up. And some of the people that only had 1 wanted another one. And I guess my question is, you answered part of it. You'll deal with each one of the individual property owners individually and say, okay, this is where we are, what do you think? Which I'm always in favor of. Let's get the people that are directly involved, also directly involved in the, and then the next thing is if it becomes that the curb cut goes made level, no more curb cut, just sidewalk. Is that the end of the story, or could in the future that go back to the way it was with the curb cut?
Well, it's a little interesting when you're dealing with state highways because typically once curb cuts go away, the state tends not to want to see them return unless there's no other alternative. If they're there, then they can always argue that they should be preserved. So that is part of the discussion and part of what we'd have to educate folks about in looking at individual curb cuts. As an example, one that's not directly affected by the grant, but just because it's here on the map, the new cafe going in here, there's a curb cut located right here, or there was, and very close proximity to the intersection. It was one of 2 driveway approaches that came in and out of the gas station. Working with the owner and with ITD, with the new construction going here, that curb cut has gone away and will not be replaced. So they will continue to have access off the one here and then the one on the Jackson Street side. Both of those are removed as much as possible from the intersection and all the interactions that occur there. So that's the kind of discussion that we would have with each property owner as we move along. Are there opportunities to take out underused or not used at all driveways, as long as there's alternatives access for them?
If you go further to the west, down to where Archer Photography is,
that happens to be right here, if I'm looking at the right one. I think
you got to go further. That way.
I just moved over one.
That's it. Oh,
that's Archer. So Archer has multiples here.
That was an old service station.
Yes.
So it had very large curb cut back in the day when that was necessary, and also across the street at that Mini Mart also has a large
That's the next one, right.
curb cut.
Diagonally across from Archer.
Right, so Archer has access off of the west side of the property. It has, I believe, 2 curb cuts in here, and then even access off the alley, if I recall. So that's one we would look at. Can we reduce the number?
Right.
Right, size and number in that case. So this is the next block to the west, so Almond to Asbury. Again, the same concept here. You see the somewhat magenta color. That would be new sidewalk through all those areas. This walk is in good condition, so we'd leave it. And then new lights in the blue, and then using city funds, replacement of the red lights as part of the overall project. Continuing on to the west, Asbury Street, then this is the mini mart I think you were just referring to.
That's the mini.
Yeah, that's the one, Jens. And so, yeah, they've got a couple here as well, same kind of thing. Perhaps, and you can see here where they're parking in front of one of them. So that's one that's very close to the intersection. It's one we'd prefer that not
Well,
be
you got
there.
one on the side, too, that goes up.
There's one here as well. Yes. Right. So again, three into the parking lot, one of which obviously is not used because they're parking in front of it. A pretty easy call for that one to come out. But those discussions would have to happen.
That's a question if I may, while you're on that picture. I presume the red rectangles are handicap ramps?
The ADA ramps, yes. Yes, where they don't currently exist.
You're not showing them on the south side of the street. Are they already in existence? Or?
Yeah, ITD did a lot of these about 4 or 5 years ago. So as you work your way
old
through.
style, or are they the ones that have to be put in this week?
They, as far as I know, they're still current. I don't think it's changed in the time since they've replaced that set. So those I believe are still good.
So the entire length of the two phases of the project would have handicap cuts,
Up to
ramps, for the length of the project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, as part of the sidewalk work. Everywhere we need to do sidewalk, they would be updated as well. So phase 2 would then pick up essentially at that same alley and work your way over, short of the Llewellyn intersection. It's really actually closer to this alley that swings north here before you get to Llewellyn. And just zooming in again, curb ramps, new lights in blue, sidewalk, north side, south side, really all the way down through here, an existing light there. And these ramps were done by ITD during that last ramp project that they undertook. And then just finishing here, originally we looked at coming up in this area, but part of the challenge is the project working with the highway, what do you do out here? And so, we're not going to be building anything out there. The route is over here, and this sidewalk's actually in decent shape through here, and this is fairly new up to this point. So we felt it was probably appropriate just to terminate it at this stage as far as this particular project. Someday this intersection may reconfigure, and then we'd see some changes in that area as well.
So effectively, that's where the money ran out.
If you consider the overall size,
$400,000 a phase.
yeah, what we're looking at right now is Elisa mentioned, a total of about $805,000. We've refined that number a bit since we put the CCSR in last week at $800.
Yeah, and that's what the packet says, 800.
Was 800 and approximately 800, but we knew we were still developing numbers as we went. As of today, we're looking at 805. As Elisa mentioned, the phase 1. The larger of the two, so the easterly phase, 477,000, and then the westerly phase 2 at 328,000. That particular split had to do somewhat with the geometry of what's out there, but also had to do with the number of accidents that were occurring within the corridor. More accidents on the east end, and so a higher project cost is offset by greater safety improvements due to the volume of accidents. So making phase 1 larger still gave us a really high cost-benefit ratio, even though the price was higher, because there were more accidents to resolve, if that makes sense. So that shifted that phase line a little bit westerly to then balance them in terms of the cost-benefit ratio a little bit better. So that's the scope of the project, and if you have further questions, we'll answer them for you.
I got a couple questions for you, Les. The lighting that has to be replaced in phase 1, you know how much that would cost, roughly?
I do not know right offhand. I think we were in the neighborhood of about 8 or so lights, and generally we use about $8,000 per light, but that includes foundation work and some of the wiring. We would be running wiring right by these lights as part of the grant-funded work, so really it's probably just the base and the light and the hookup itself. So that number is, perhaps a little lower than that, 8,000 per.
The wiring's already there, it would just be
Right.
the.
Right, you'd be just connecting those
new
that-
fixture that would have to be connected to it.
Right.
And then how many lights are in phase 2?
Well, I was thinking actually overall, I would have to count them up, frankly, to know the total.
If it's the same amount, you'd be looking
Six,
at
it looks like
roughly
actually
$100,000 to replace the lights that are already there.
Yeah, I think
So
we've
they'd
got
all match.
6. I think we've got roughly 6 in the first phase, if I'm catching them all. And, one second. Yeah, I believe 6 there, and phase 2, looks like it has another 3 or 4. Yeah, I don't know if we would do this one down here, because it's outside the scope, so probably 3 there, so about 9 altogether. So just say roughly 80,000 for all of them,
Walter,
considering.
you have a fund for this,
Say it again, we have a what?
a fund
A fund for this type of work? Yes,
for the street,
some of
for the
the,
streetlight work because of the streetlight fee
Right.
that accumulates.
right, yeah,
correct?
some of the streetlight fee does go into the capital program for streetlight replacements. And yes, and Lisa just reminded me that the URA is also, as indicated in the packet, committed so far to about 15,000 in funds towards this effort, and will be considering whether or not they could participate at a higher level. Part of that discussion has been that how we do address the additional costs for the lights, and that would be potentially a good area for the URA to participate at a higher level if they choose to do so. Lacking that, then we would be looking to the streetlight fund to pay for those additional lights.
Another question?
I'm prepared to make a motion, but I want to make sure that the motion hasn't changed as presented in the packet because of the change into 2 phases.
Actually, I think it was worded such that we would make applications, plural, totaling
Funding
It was
requests.
it was a
requests, plural, for up to 100.
805,000 was the
800,000.
overall entire thing, right?
Right, if
Yes.
both
So it hasn't-
projects were
yeah.
approved.
Correct.
Combined
So that's what
project
the motion
costs.
would be.
I'll make the motion, and Les can say, don't anybody second that because it's not worded right. I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we approve submittal of funding request to FY19 Local Highway Safety Improvement Program with estimated combined project cost of approximately $805,000 for pedestrian safety improvements on the 3rd Street corridor from Jackson Street to the area of Llewellyn Street.
I'll second that.
Does that sound good to you, Les?
Sounds great.
Okay. We have a motion by Walter and a second by John to approve a submittal of funding request for FY19 Local Highway Safety Improvement Program with an estimated combined project cost of approximately $805,000 for pedestrian safety improvements on the 3rd Street corridor from Jackson Street to Llewellyn Street. Start the roll, John.
Aye.
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 All right.
Right?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa and Les.